Don says in question 6, that's what I thought you might say. Am I correct in assuming that at the beginning of this octave, out of what I would call a void of space, the seeds of an infinite number of galactic systems, such as the Milky Way galaxy, appeared and grew in spiral fashion simultaneously? Ross says, there are duple areas of potential confusion. Firstly, let us say that the basic concept is reasonably well stated. Now we address the confusion. The nature of the simultaneity is such that indeed all is simultaneous. However, in your modes of perception, you would perhaps more properly view the seeding of the creation as that of growth from the center or core outward. The second confusion lies in the term void. We would substitute the noun plenum. Plenum. I love that word. This cosmology is gorgeous. All right. So Don has a very it's a good question, yet of course it's limited by the type of language we can use with our minds, and that's the in the beginning, there was a center, and then it started to grow gradually. We see this with the sun. We see this with the galaxy. Actually, with the sun, it's just one big nebula, and it just starts coalescing into a star. So everything happens at the same time, but at least the galaxy spreads out its arms with more stars, right? So we see this with the galaxy, and that's why he's mentioning the Milky Way galaxy here. Actually, he says, the beginning of this octave, out of what I would call a void of space, the seeds of an infinite number of galactic systems, such as the Milky Way, appear and grew in spiral fashion. No, yeah, I think he's referring to all galaxies growing simultaneously. They appeared and grew simultaneously. The seeds of an infinite number of galactic systems. So that's the Big Bang, and yet is not the Big Bang. So Ra says that the basic concepts are reasonably well stated, but there are two areas of confusion. The first one is that the nature of true simultaneity is such that all is simultaneous. But in our modes of perception, we would see the seeding of the creation as that of growth from the center or core outward. Now, I don't know why our modes of perception are specific to seeing the growth this way. Maybe because of light, right? Our reality is made out of light. So maybe that's what they mean. I don't know. The modes of our perception allow us to see that as of growth from the center or core outward. So everything is simultaneous, and this can be understood in awareness. Okay? And I'll get to that. But let me cover the second substitution, or the second confusion, which is substitution of the word void for plenum. The word plenum is the root of our word for plenty, which is abundance. And I love it because this word void is referred to as that which is prior to the creation, that which is prior to mind, awareness. Sunyata is the void in Buddhism. And it refers to that place in ourselves, which is just awareness. If you look at awareness, if the mind looks back at awareness, which is its nature, right? The mind is simply an activity. But we don't know what this activity is about, or rather what the nature of this activity is. So what do? We investigate the nature of mind. And we find that mind is simply an activity made out of thoughts and images. But the source of this is pure awareness. And we start investigating this. This is what we do again in the direct path. That's why it's called the direct path, actually, because we go straight into the void. And we see that everything there is peaceful. And out of this peace, happiness starts to shine. Although gradually, but it does start to shine. We get those glimpses of happiness in the peace. You see? So, that's what we call the void. That awareness. There's nothing there. Absolutely nothing. Pure awareness. But that is not empty. There is no nothingness there. In fact, Ra said, this is why I love so much doing this work with the mystical teachings of Ra. When Ra said that the dissolution into nothingness, right? This is Ra's words. The dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity, for there is no nothingness. How perfect is that for anybody who loves the raw material? The dissolution into nothingness is the dissolution into unity. For there is no nothingness. So that nothingness that you perceive as the source of your mind is in fact unity. Because there is no quality there. There is no distinction. You cannot divide awareness into two. Awareness is just one awareness. You can say you're aware of two different things, two different thoughts. Yes, that's the mind. You see, the mind is that filter into which awareness comes through and splits itself into positive and negative, or up and down, or inside and outside, and so on. So I guess from our modes of perception, we would see this as coming from a sort of center and moving outward. And that's what we call space. That's what we call the universe. We see things out there and they move outwardly, just like we do. Isn't that interesting? We think we are inside. We say, "Oh, I'm this," but are you the skin? No, I'm deeper in. Oh, so you're in the heart? Yeah, no, but deeper than the heart. So if you keep looking where the inside is, you'll find out that you are the singularity. I mean, you truly are the singularity. You can't call yourself anything short of that, or more than that outward. See? So you are the singularity, and everything else is coming out of you. So the universe is growing all around you. Why? Because you're aware of it. And awareness is what creates everything. Isn't that simple? See, we don't have to go too deep into esoteric traditions to know this. It's a simple recognition. And it is all in awareness. But I like the word plenum. In fact, every time I talk about the void, I reference Ra when they said plenum, because it's such a beautiful substitution for what we call nothingness. Let me explain why. Nothingness is what the mind sees when it looks at its source. This makes total sense, because the mind can only see different things. It can only see limitations. It can only see parts. And so when it looks at unity, it won't see anything. It can't see anything. although it is aware that there is an existence there. See, the mind can actually taste it and say, yes, there is something there, but I just can't put a name to it. And so philosophically or religiously, we say we cannot name God. We cannot put a name to God. What is God? Well, if we say it, then we sort of limit it. God is not limited. Infinity is not limited. It's not a number. The first thing I learned in mathematics that fascinated me, there's a concept, what, infinity? It's true. I cannot count more than, I remember my brother blowing my mind with this, saying, try to count towards infinity. And that moment for me was just, wow. So that's why we call it plenum, because everything is coming out from there. Everything is in there. Nothing has left there. It's always been there. See, so that's the plenum. The mind perceives a separation and says, oh yeah, there is a space and there is time. That's the mind. But without the mind, it's just this. Is it terrifying? Nobody has said that. Everybody who explores this, although yes, I must mention, just to be thorough, that some people who have some traumatic, I would say, or neurotic mind, the ego gets very anxious, and so they identify with this anxiety and say, oh no, that's terrible, there is nothing there, I'm scared. And that's something that we need to take into account when we talk to people. And that's why I don't emphasize this too much, but rather just know the nature of who you are and feel that presence of quiet peace that is experiencing everything. So I've learned that in some situations where people get anxious at the thought of nothingness. So that's a concession we need to do with these people. But most people, when they reach that point, they realize that there is a peace. That's the peace they were looking for. So plenum is an excellent word. And of course, in terms of space, the plenum, because there is no space that became aware. All that we see space is really awareness. So this perception of things that are happening in the universe through the mind are born out of this plenum as well. That's what space is. This is also the basis of what we call 0 point energy, right? Because space is not empty. Space is full of energy. So if we do the right, which I don't know how it's done, but if we can harness the pressure of space. See, it's almost like, the way I see it, the way I understand it, is that there is atmospheric pressure, right? That's what we measure. For example, Venus, the atmospheric pressure is just brutal, because there is a lot of atmosphere, there's a lot of gas out there, everything was evaporated, so all of that is crushing what's at the surface. We have atmospheric pressure here too, right? And that's what's maintaining some sort of cohesion in the atmosphere. So space, imagine that all the energy, infinite energy, has this space pressure, right? And if we are able to, just like in the atmosphere, right? When we talk about Mach speed, the speed of sound, is when we break that, what we're doing is opening. That's why airplanes can sound, if they're breaking, of course, the sound barrier. What they're doing is that they're slicing air so fast that it takes a fraction of a second for air to collapse that vacuum. You see, that's an enormous pressure that happens there, and it's just like a clap, a thunderclap actually is that too. It's breaking a sort of fissure on air, and air is collapsing back. So it's a clap. Boom. That's why we call it thunderclap. Literally just a big clap of air. Now imagine this is happening with space. And if we can do that same thing, then space will collapse towards that center, because space wants to continue to be space. It doesn't want to be split. And so that's 0-point energy, because space is all around us. We don't need atmosphere. We don't need solar panels. We don't need anything. So Tesla discovered this a while ago, and some people said, no, we're not ready for this. We are very afraid of energy because survival and countries and communism and so on. So, no, maybe we're not ready for it.